entrepreneurs. Aren't you all? Aren't we all? Isn't everyone? Anyway, so what I'm going to talk about today is I'm going to start with the company that I've had a lot of knowledge of ever since I first started my career out of college in animal nutrition and world travel, I guess, was the other part of my world studies. But anyway, it was a long time ago. I want to start with a very successful story of an entrepreneur back in the 1860s that started his own family business and grew it to what it is today, which is a $114 billion company with about 150,000 employees around the world. Unfortunately, he's not still alive, but I want the interesting part of the story is the continuation of the company through many generations of the family. As they expanded, as the business got bigger, faced more trouble. So we're going to talk about that first. We're going to give you some information, background, and then we're going to get into strategic planning, which is what I'm really here to talk about at the end of the day. So we want to talk about what they're doing and see some background so you see that there is some really good end results from quality strategic planning. So with that, I had, since 1971, I've been around Cargill in the animal nutrition feed industry on there. And first, then let me give you some information on Cargill. This is as of 2018, as of June, actually this year. Revenue of 114 billion, cash flow of 5 products from ingredients all the way to the consumer was a key thing for them to be in charge of and understand. So that was the supplier. Now, they also back in those days, and still do, they had their own, quote, animal nutrition department, because I was with Ralston Purina at that time, and they're animal nutrition. So they were our competitor. So I got to compete against them then. At the same time, they were a supplier in one department. One thing Cargill had a problem with that we were able to take advantage of is they did not understand the value, quote, of a brand. They were an acquirer of businesses, and they just took whatever it was, feed company A, animal nutrition business B, they just left that brand alone and just tried to manage it for its cash flow. So they never really understood early on what the vision of a brand really was. They focused on cost. They were relentless on taking cost out of the business and becoming a low-cost supplier. But put them with a quality product. But they did not want anything out there that they couldn't control the cost on and make sure that every penny was needed, from their offices to everything they did. They had a total package. You could get your raw materials, you could get your finished product, you could get your vitamins, whatever you needed, they had a total package. And then they were aggressive acquirers of businesses. Any business that came up for sale, they would buy it and bring it under their umbrella. Like I said, their downfall or their downside, not downfall, their downside was they didn't ever try to mesh and really bring all the synergies. It became a manufacturing facility using in a distribution chain. Now, then in 2001, we had spun off a company from Ralston Purina and took it public, traded on the New York Stock Exchange called AgriBrands. Cargill came along and made us an offer for our business that shareholders couldn't refuse. They asked me to come to Minneapolis and run the combined animal nutrition business. They had one of their own, we had one. They were about the same size, both operated globally, and so we put them together. At that time, we become a $2 billion company, and we had about 10,000 employees around the world, 26 countries. So it was a pretty good sized business, a lot of fun flying around on airplanes all the time. So I became an employee of Cargill. My first thing was when I got there, we were very focused where I had come from. We had a company that was basically 45 people in our headquarters. We operated very decentralized, everything was outside of the U.S. So when we got to Cargill, when I first started, they had 90 divisions. And with the acquisition of us, we became the number 3 division in size. And what I found was this complex management structure, that how slow things operated to get a decision through. And they could never understand. And we used to always sit back and wonder, okay, we've got all this technology, we've got all this information, we can do all these great things, we've got the best people. Why don't we have 100% of the market share? The main thing was, in that large an organization, having the ability to make quick decisions for your customers becomes almost impossible. Because you're stepping on you in your division, you may be stepping on her toes, you may be stepping on his toes back there. So everybody's got to put their word in on a decision before it gets back and implemented. So that was an issue they continually worked on, but it was something that was really, you know, when you're out in the field and you're running your little part of the Cargill world, it was aggravating. But anyway, the upside made up for that as an employee, because they were very good to their employees. Another thing I learned was they wanted to put the latest, greatest technology in the hands of everybody at one time. And what we had learned before that was technology has a time and place, and it has a value here, and it may be a greater value than over here in this market. And knowing the right technology to start people with and then bring them along is a great attribute to running a business and acquiring good customers and making money at it. So we had a lot of information, a lot of data, and the other thing that they didn't fully understand at that point was pricing. Pricing to them was where you take your cost of ingredients, your cost of manufacturing, and you add money to it, add something to it. You don't know if it's the right or wrong, but they wanted it to be cheaper than someone else's. So the ideal was they left a lot of value on the table because they were not used to being price leaders. And if you're a price leader in a market, there comes with that a lot of responsibility. One, you have to earn the right to be the price leader with your product, with your technology, with the total package you bring to the customer. So not understanding that is a big, big deal. Then the second part of it is, if you're going to be a price leader, you've got to be able to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that what you're charging is worth it in relation to product, why product is needed out there. So those are just some learnings I had when I got to them on there. Now, let me jump backwards now to the beginning of Cargill, and let's talk about the founder a little bit, the original entrepreneur. William Wallace Cargill. The year was 1865, and he started and purchased a flat house, which at that time was for grain. That's where the farmers back in those, imagine 1865, you've seen a lot of historical movies over time. They're out there cutting down the wheat, cutting corn, doing all this, and they're bringing it in to their little town, little small town, and there it's assembled by somebody that's either buying it for them or storing it for them. That's a flat house. It's a warehouse. So he started those, and his first one was in Iowa. his ideal was, and let me back up a little bit, he was from New York originally, so he wasn't born out on a little house on the prairie. He was born in New York, raised there. His father was actually a sea captain, so he was a wanderer and took advantage of opportunities, so that's him. Now, he decided that if he was going to have a strategic advantage and be the first with this, at that time, what was going on in the 1860s? It was right after the war, Civil War. It was also the expansion of railroads across all of the central and western United States. What he understood was that the railroads were key to the production of grain and moving it from point A to point B where the big populations were and where it was needed. So he figured out real quick that every time the railroad went another 20 miles down, that would be a good place to build another little flat house on there. So then if it would go another 20 miles, he would build another flat house. So this is how he got started. He followed 3 or 4 smaller railroads and kept continually building and having a strategy and stayed focused. So his vision was helping farmers prosper, connecting markets, bringing consumers the products they're seeking. Pretty straightforward. Find a need, fill it. Help people out. He said his business concept, which is where it all kind of starts with, he sourced local agricultural commodities, he graded, warehouse, assembled for rail shipments, moved to larger locations for processing. Economies of scale. Yes. By the way, that grade, that's established way back when. Chicago Board of Trade, and it's just a standard for how you price corn, wheat, whatever that they have. How did his business do? Said he followed the railroads. Decided the railroads were going more to Minnesota and Wisconsin, so he moved into Minnesota and Wisconsin and started expanding there. He then decided, okay, I'm getting big. I need to do something. I want to raise mules and sell them to all these people for their farms. Well, he tried that, but it was a losing. He found out quickly he knew more about the first steps, sorting and finding the grain, bringing it all together in one place and moving it than he did about raising mules and lost money. But he's listened from this. Not all investments work out. And that's a very good lesson, is knowing when to cut your losses as an entrepreneur when you're trying new things, because you're going to continually be trying new things. But it's learning, when do I get out of it? What is my stopping point on this? When is the point of I'm not going to get anything out of this? He invested in some flour mills. He didn't just buy them by himself. He had somebody else that had the expertise of running it, but he had enough money and knew that he could furnish them the grain, so he partnered with some other people to start flour mills. So then by 1885, they had 102 structures across the Midwest, upper Midwest. So they were expanded pretty rapidly in those 20 years. So they were getting into how do you manage something where you're not looking it in the face every day of your life, which is the biggest change in managing that you'll ever see in your life. It's one thing to manage things and people when you can have contact every day with them and see with your own eyes what they're doing. But when you start having to deal with people that you may see once every 2 months, once every year, and you talk to them on the phone, emails, text, whatever you do, then it becomes a harder read. You have to read between the lines. And I used to call it matching the audio and video and putting them together on there. Now, this is, you're probably looking at this one and saying, okay, what did he put that in here for? Why did he put the marriage of one daughter Well, the marriage of his daughter to John McMillan will play a big role in this company's success on down the road. As you can see, he died in 1909. Just before that, he had taken out, he got leveraged. They had expanded more, and it got pretty good size, and got quite a bit. His bankers were kind of on him a little bit. So he was, John came in and took control. And fortunately, he came from a banking background. And he understood, and he could deal with them, and he was able to get them through the first really big financial crisis that they had as a company. So he had the right person at the right time, and assured their creditors that everything was just fine. So,
All right.
now we got, how do we go from here now? We've changed one manager, one owner, the original entrepreneur. Now we're going on into the next phase of the business and what's going on. But when you start doing this stage, we get into governance. And governance, if you see in the day, if you turn on a TV station or especially a business channel and look at Wall Street Journal, you never see a day that goes by without something about governance or issues that companies had, unfortunately. But governance for the company, he laid out some very basic rules, but he let everybody that worked for him know what they were. Grain trading back in those days, and still today, involved emphasis on secrecy to gain competitive advantage. That's all you had. If you knew the pricing, if you knew what it was worth here, you understood then how much you could pay at this point, plus your cost to get it there so that you could make a return. And you could do it, and the more you could buy without your competitors knowing what you were paying for it, the better off you were.
Was it like a countrywide thing, or was it more so between like the states that they were just operating in?
It was more within the states and the local territories, because the closer you are to the finished market, the more you have a price understanding or discovery. And this is very true today. We'll talk about it some in the next part. But if you think of this now, this proprietary knowledge at that time, it seems pretty simple, secrecy. But that is what I would relate today to what we call code in businesses. Some IT company that develops a code, somebody that develops an algorithm to help find what you're searching at on the internet. These kind of things have to be protected. So you've got to spend a lot of time and energy to make sure that. Cargill family, in their blood, and in they continually risk management. They were dealing with something that today it's worth this, tomorrow through nothing they did, it could be worth this. So how do you avoid those risks? How do you cover them? How do you protect yourself from that? So risk management was a huge undertaking in their early days. Outside advisors. He did a good job of bringing in some bankers after the first episode. They brought in bankers, they brought in other people from other industries that could help them as advisors. He didn't just get family members or somebody down the street from him or somebody he had dinner with. He went in search of people that really added value to the business. Now, rating agencies. How do you determine if you're doing any good? We're going to talk about this a little bit later, so I won't go into it much right now. But anyway, so rating agencies and using their advice and what they say became a huge opportunity. Now, one of the things as a smaller business or as a private company, if you don't go public, one of the things you run into is you can quickly, even Cargill, when they were a $30 billion, $40 billion, $50 billion company, they were relatively unknown because they weren't, quote, traded on Wall Street. So the big banks, and a lot of those people, it was out in Minneapolis, it was off out here, it wasn't heard of. So it was hard to attract the top talent when you're, quote, an unknown. It's much easier for a Merrill Lynch, whoever you want, Apple, whoever you want, to recruit people with their big names than it is for Tom Sullivan's hardware delivery business out here. It's just a fact of life, but it doesn't mean you need any less qualified people. So Cargill early on, as it shows here back in 1931, took trainees that held promise, that they felt they had found somebody your age that was really an up-and-comer and showed great potential right off the bat. They established training classes and would bring people like yourselves together from all over the country. And then by this time they were nationwide and also internationally too. But they brought these up-and-comers together and started putting them through special training and kept an eye on them to see how they did. So they took training seriously at a very early stage of the business. In the 60s, it became, college recruiting was one of the core competencies of this company, and still is today. They had teams assigned to different universities that they sent out, and they cultivated professors to make sure that they got a chance to talk to the best and brightest that they had in their classes and their departments over the years. So they went out and they made a conscious effort early on to go out and find these kind of people that they were going to need to run this business and sell them on the Cargill way. The guiding principles, that was basically your handbook for being a Cargill employee. What it was it had everything, and it was about that thick when you read it all. But it went into things, and it's on their website, but simple things. But you just can't take anything for granted. We obey the law. And when you're working in 70 countries, you need to make sure your employees understand what the laws are. We conduct our business with integrity. Our word is our bond. We keep accurate and honest records. Simple. All these are straightforward. But it's how you live the story, not how you tell the story, that makes a difference to your employees. So when you say it, do it. When you put it together with your businesses. We honor our business obligations. We treat people with dignity and respect. We protect Cargill's information, assets, and interests. We're committed to being a responsible global citizen. These go back years and years, and it's very, very good to be associated with somebody that lived by their word on there. Now, let's talk now about the real session here. Succession planning. And before I start on this, now, I think you've had several different class sessions concerning succession planning, and you feel like you understand it.
Some are muddier than others.
It is one of the hardest things to do. It's easy to say, and you think you're doing it, but number one, if it's your baby, especially if the business is yours that you started, this gets really, really tough because you're at your first move. You jump in and change it back exactly like you started because you had the thoughts, and along comes your firstborn child or your cousin or your nephew or somebody that you bring into the business, and they want to do something just a little bit different, you've got to start opening up your mind. And before you created in your mind what the perfect scenario was and situation, you knew how to control it and move it. So, it's not easy. The one thing they did in the family was you had to earn your advancement opportunities. Just because you were Cargill did not mean you were guaranteed that you were going to be one of the top managers of the company as they grew. You had to earn, you had to work different jobs in the company. You were put out so you fully understood it before you came in. Nobody went off to Harvard or Yale and then came back, and a month later they were the vice president of half of the world. The other thing they did, they had the opportunity to move to other businesses and geography, so they learned about the total business as they moved up. Now, what this also did, one of the key things out of that part was it confirmed who your leaders were. If you move to different businesses, have different people under them, at some point they're going to run, because what you're facing here is it the team behind the person that makes them the real winner, or is it the person that's leading that is bringing the organization up? Because, and you've seen this with many companies today. You know, you put a guy in a football team. Let's talk about football teams. How many of us have seen football teams where the coach has recruited but gets fired because he had a losing team, but he has got some great recruits coming on but didn't have time to develop them into what he wanted in a full, complete package. They bring somebody in and pay him $17 million, and all of a sudden, down the road, he's playing, the first year he has a good year because he's playing on other borrowed talent. His recruits start coming in 2 and 3 years down the road, and things go south in a hurry. And then you find out maybe it was the team underneath the person that was doing the job and not the leader of the group. So, giving them that opportunity to take them out of what they've been used to, let them see how they can adapt with different people, different structures, different businesses. It's a good way of doing it. Now, the scariest part of an entrepreneur's life, outside of turning it over to your own child, is when you give the helms to an outsider. All of a sudden, because you got brothers and sisters yourself that are in the business, or your kids, you have 5 kids and they're all in the business, and they all think they should be getting a chance to run the business, but you know they're not right ready yet for it, or it's not the type of business they should be running. Getting the right person is oh so important. Well, Cargill was fortunate when they chose Mr. Kelm because he was the right man at the right time. And I'll read you something in a couple slides here about him. But the other side of this story, an example, and one I would suggest you read sometime, it's a very interesting read. It is called Dethroning the King. It's about the Bush family in St. Louis and Budweiser beer and their fortunes and what happened to them at the end. Even though they were a publicly traded company, it was run like a private company and in the hands of the Bush family. And the interesting story is there, how they run it into the ground by putting the wrong person, one of the family members, in charge of the business. And it totally took down a large family, well, not family, it was public, but one of the largest companies in the beer companies in the world at that time. But anyway, that was, he came in, and he was actually there for 16 years. I believe was the number. He did a great job, so he got the trust of the family. They knew who he was, and he had a lot of good attributes. Then, he went billing. the next guy that came along was one of the family members, one of the Millens. And he'd been trained, he came up, he earned a right, and he was there for for 19 years. He ran the business. And that was, he was actually the last family member to hold the position of chairman, CEO of the company. Because Mr. Kellum had done such a good job, they had no fear of using, quote, a non-family member in the business to run it. So then after Whitney, then Meissen come in. He was there only for 4 years, primarily because of health, and Warren Staley came in. And he was there whenever I came on board. Very nice, very informative gentleman. And now Cargill's on their 5th non-family CEO, David McLaren. So, now, don't feel sad for the Cargill family members, of which there are roughly 80 some now, that are still owners of stock in the company, which they own 80% of it, employees own 20% on there. The last one was Austin Cargill, who was there when I was with the company. Austin Cargill, the second, actually. He was in the research, corporate research department. He, as they always like to say, he decided to pursue other interests and left the company and went to Montana, but he's now worth about $4 million based on his small, tiny share of the company. So don't feel sorry for him. His trust is taking care of him quite well.
That's probably why all the family members were fine with the non-family CEO. They just kept it, they kept the train moving.
As long as that number keeps going up. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. Okay, here's a very interesting thing I read from this about Kelm. Natural talent for numbers. Now, how many of you here really, really love math? Okay. How many really can even understand accounting classes that you've had? Okay. One thing I've seen, I've been exposed to a lot, I've had the fortune of being exposed to a lot of CEOs, but every one of them, just about to the T, that are what I consider halfway successful, have an ability to process numbers in their mind. They may not be great mathematicians, and they don't want to do math for a living, but they have numbers that they pop out of their head and just scare you to death with how fast their mind can move on that. It's just because they look at them and understand. But an understanding of numbers, and that's quite honestly what impressed the company with him, was his ability. He started out, I think, in their finance group, their number crunchers, and then went into production side and all through it. But he understood the numbers. He was commended for his confidence, vision, and ability to empower his team. If you got all those, what do you need? What else do you need to be a leader? Whether it's your own enterprise or whether it's a company, somebody else's company, whatever. But that pretty well defines great leadership, just in that statement right there. And that was stories about the company back in the day then. Now, strategic planning. Okay. When you're doing strategic planning, one of the things I'm sure you probably talked about is one of the first things that comes up is the evaluation of your business, your strengths and weaknesses. Does that sound about right? What you've been reading and been taught so far? Very true. What can go wrong with strengths and weaknesses?
You try to overcompensate.
Yeah.
Trying to address too much on the weakness and not,
Let me tell you, the thing I've been able to see, and I've been working with these, like I said, pretty much since mid-1970s, with different groups and different levels of work, building up plans. The thing I have continually seen, and still to this day, as sitting on a board, on the board of directors of the company, is that first word that's key, honest. Because you're so proud of your business, you're so proud of the people, the team that you have, that you hired. You're so proud of that group, as you should be. You gotta be, you gotta be. But you tend to walk around with blinders on sometimes. It can also do that because you like, it's just like, my child is the cutest baby ever born. The wife I picked is the most beautiful woman ever. The husband I found is so-so, but he's a good so-so. But anyway, the honesty of stepping back and saying, okay, are we the best at that? Is that truly what our core competency is? We've been putting the same core competency on something. I would go in and set on presentations for the strategic planning from the country, and they would come back and it almost looked like the same strategic plan from the year before. We're going to capture this much market share. We're going to do this. We're going to launch new products. We're going to go after this market. And we'd get down to the discussion and we'd talk about, okay, what are you really doing different? Oh, well, we're going to be better than competition this year. Why are you going to be better than competition? Well, we got a new product. Do you know that that product is better yet? The customers think and appreciate it is better? No. Then let's go in deeper. Do you have the same people operating this plan that you had last year? Yeah. Okay. Have they been trained any differently than last year? No. So, how honest is that evaluation? If you had really stepped back and said, okay, this person was great, this team was great to this level, but to get to the next level, to get a new strategy involved, do I have the right players? Or are they, as you read in the books, are they on the right seat in the bus? Which may be the case. A lot of times we saw that. So it's getting down to honest evaluation, being able to step back, talk to people who you work with outside, and get a real evaluation. First, do you have the right team in place to do that? Now, do I know the rate of return by business? Because pretty soon you're going to, or by product line, however you want to break it down in your new business that you start up, or the company you're working with. What's a good rate of return for that? Is it pulling its weight? Are you putting the right assets against the right opportunity? Or if you're so successful and you gain a 90% market share, how big is that market? What's it going to do for your overall business? How much money is it going to tie up to do it? How much of your personal time is it going to take to make it successful? So your rate of return based on investment, time, manpower. The other thing we used to do, that was, you step back and it looked pretty simple-minded now, but we used to invariably send one of our best managers to one of our poorest performing operations. Just, quote, straighten it out on there. Well, some places, some businesses just can't be straightened out. And you wind up spending this person that could take the business and go run with it, continue to run with it, and you tie them up and put them in a business where it's you know, yeah, they're going to win eventually, but the win may be so small that it doesn't matter at the end of the day. So put your resources where the opportunity is. Match them up. The midterm, long-term fit of the business. This is one where companies are, sounds cold-hearted, but a lot of times you get a business that you have the talent, you have the understanding, you have the synergies between it and quote, your headquarters and your other businesses to really take it to another level. Other times you don't. And it's just hanging on. And a really good example of that is what is we were coming down on the board at Energizer Holdings. We had we got into the chef razor business back in the 2000s, early 2000s, and got into that. Got Playtex. We got into all kind of other consumer goods, shave cream, the banana boat, sunscreen, Hawaiian tropic. We got into all of this stuff, and they were good. They had great margins. They were really the exciting, fun thing. Besides, you want a battery? Here's a battery. So that got all the attention, and the battery people just kept. We weren't feeding them money. We weren't doing that, and it was just kind of just hanging on. Wasn't getting bad, but it wasn't getting any better. So the thought process became, well, we can't be putting money there. We got to put it in this other opportunity. And we finally split the businesses in 4 years ago now this summer. And which one do you think has done the best since it's been priority? And people have got a feeling that they're winners now. They're not just supplying capital for somebody else. The battery business has done great on its own. The Energizer group captured new market share, set new records in the business, and the other business is struggling to stay alive. Now that we spun it off. So anyway, these things happen. It's a long-term fit of the business. What fits today may not fit tomorrow. And it's not going backwards if you sell it, put it in the hands of an owner that really can take it somewhere that it has more value to. So understanding the value of that business. The quality of your leaders. This gets into, this is tough. This is really tough. Because when you start a business that's say $500,000 business, and you bring in Tom, Sue, Alice, Sam as managers, they may be committed and they may be great at managing 10 people each and operating within 20 miles of Jacksonville. But then all of a sudden your business has really become successful. You've expanded all over Northeast Florida. And now you've got, instead of 50 people, you now have 500 people. And like I've said before, can those leaders, have you give them training and opportunity? Have you brought them along at the same level as the growth of the business? And evaluated how much stretch do they have? So that's another thing on the quality of your leaders. And boy, when you have to have that conversation with them, first you have to, one, do what you can to bring them along. Training-wise, give them the tools, give them the people under them, but make sure at some point you've got to sit back and say, is this person better doing something else? Because we've taken it as far. He's holding back other people in the company, or she is, he is, whoever. But it takes a hard conversation with yourself because there's a lot of loyalty there. But it's your job to make sure that they're put in a position to win. If you can't put them in a position to win, you need to help them with some other company. I know that sounds cold-hearted, but if you've got a lot of employees that got to move at a fast pace, it's a decision you have to make. You do it with all the stakeholders. Last one, be good friends with your bankers and financiers. At some point, you're going to need them, and you want them on your side. What are you going to do for the future? I think Diane said you're just getting ready to get into some of this, I believe, didn't you, Diane? On structures. Financial goals, what's your key measure, and don't change every year, and don't change it every year, so that you know if you're making progress or not. You use outside rating agencies. Cargill lived and died with the outside rating agencies as a private company because they didn't have outside shareholders that were telling them how much they should be returning, suggesting what they do and all this. But the rating agencies was, we wanted to have no less than B plus debt. And the rating agencies kind of told the family, they're doing good enough to get that, so they're doing a good job in relation to others. Cash is king. Now, bankers will try to get you to leverage up because they make money lending you money. But cash is king. And this become very critical when you have to freeze up in the financial system that we had in 08 and 09. Strategic planning. No matter how good a planner you are, you better have a plan B. What was the early plan B for Cargill? His daughter married a banker, McMillan. I don't know if he planned it that way or not, but it sure worked out as a good plan B in that situation because the first crisis they had was over the banking industry. So anyway, that's your financial goals. Now, governance. For governance, an outside board, not just friends. You want people that will tell you what you don't want to hear sometimes, but you want people that are qualified. You're a CPA, you want a banker, you want a community leader maybe that's there. You're going to be concerned about your stakeholders of the entire operation. You want to bring in consultants if needed to give you some outside expertise, bring in fresh ideas, help you evaluate your team, and help them have them suggest training and ways to bring people along. Be sure you're looking at best practices, and this can come through either consultants or on your own. See what other companies are doing around there in your industry, understanding what the best practices are and apply them to your business. Don't be afraid of taking ideas from others. And the last one on here is deal with personnel issues sooner rather than later. Have those frank talks if things are starting to go south between you and one of your key talents. Have those discussions early on. Don't just let it keep thinking it's going to get better, it's going to get better, it's going to get better. Set down a plan, redirect, and counsel with them, give them help. You want them to succeed. You're not out to crucify anybody. You're wanting people to succeed. You want to give them every chance you can. But at some point, you've got to say, that's enough chances between both things. So that's the issues on the governance. On that part, we'll talk about it more if you want to. Now, financing. Talk about the 07-08 market crisis. We had at Energizer at that time a real true story. We had 10-year notes that were coming due in a year and a half or 2 years from that. So we felt we had some time. But at the same token, the markets were actually so frozen at that point for borrowing for companies to renew a $2 billion loan, the notes on that you couldn't get it at any interest rate. It was just nobody was lending. And you start having these things come up, which means you're rolling that money over. You got to have a new loan to replace it. You can't get it. You got a real sleepless night ahead of you when those things happen. So understand your financing. talked about the worst case scenario, outside investors. If you're bringing them in, understand who you're dealing with. Do your due diligence. Don't accept free money, because it's not free. It comes with strings attached. And understand up front what they're going to do and what they're going to demand and what your criteria is for meeting. Make sure you're on the same page that they are on the criteria you have to meet on the loans. Now, there's issue stock, and that's it's a whole new game out there, and we see that every day in the paper now. With the big example comes out, WeWork. I think any of you read a paper lately may have read that about them and their issues. So here's one. Sounds like such a great ideal. Everybody wants to do this. Every employee that works for a privately held company, if you as an entrepreneur get big enough and you bring in employees, at some point, you're going to start saying, you know, maybe I should issue them some stock. They would really get ownership of this company. Then you have others that to get a good person, they want you to stock. And the .com was, oh Lord, you couldn't hire anybody out of college without them wanting, I want 10,000 options to go to work. You can pay me nothing, but I want options. That was the big deal on that. Boy, did that not work out so good at that point in time. And it has for a lot of companies. If you're an Amazon employee, it's worked out real well. But for other ones, it hasn't. So, the stock. How do you value it? This is, getting into giving stock is really easy. It's what happens. How do we value it if someone leaves a company? Do they get stock if they've left the company? How do you get rid of it? How do you redeem it? What is this? It's a much bigger, deeper thought process than most people give it when they start a program like this. How do you let them exit? Now, here's the worst thing. I've issued you 10,000 shares of stock on a promise that it's going to be worth something, and now the value of it, according to our outside analyst, it was issued with $20, and now they're telling me it's worth $5. Nothing we did. That's just in relation to what the other businesses that are publicly traded and the cash flow of this business tells us it's worth. Is that person a happy camper now with their stock? No. So.
If they're exiting, I mean, it's kind of on them, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Or if they're retired.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah.
Anyway, it's something that you really need to make sure you understand how the exit program works for that. And usually, and the thing we continually find today, even in the public companies, is that the stock price itself is composed of so many outside influences: government, elections, foreign trade, all these many issues out there that 98% of the employees in a company have very little input on what it is in the short run. So some people can get hurt really bad over this, but it's, you know, all I'm saying is look hard and fast when you start thinking about giving stock ownership to employees. It's a motivator at some point, but it can be a huge demotivator in a lot of cases also, and understand how you're going to get out of it. Now, the last one is pleasing the family, or last area. Okay, so you've got some family that invested, or you've got kids now that are out in the world doing their own thing. Relatives that invested a few dollars, but now it's worth a lot. What do you do with them? Well, first, do they understand what the business is? Do they really, really understand? Why are they investors? These two things. And is it family pride that they're investing in the business? Is it because of their total wealth and they have a trust fund and 50% of the money in that trust fund has come from the business? So understand who your stakeholders are and what is their reason. how active are they gonna be and want to be in managing the business? The creative and tax advantage ways to exit ownership. All of a sudden, when you get ready to exit this business, you started this business with $1,000 and now it's worth $10 million. How do you think the government values that when you pay your taxes on this? Capital gain that you had. It's a huge number. And it's really be depressing when you get to that. So it's finding creative ways to do that with your tax account, creative but legal ways to do that, and assuming they will not change. The other is, if you're going in with a partner or other family members, you need to have someone sit down and spell out the value of the business will be determined upon its split in ownership. You don't want to not only lose a business partner and lose a brother or a sister or an uncle or an aunt or one of your best friends over an issue of, well, it should be valued at this and no, it's not worth this. So the clearer you can make that going in, the better it's going to be on down the road. And the last slide here is communicating with the stakeholders. You've got to have quarterly, semi-annual meetings at the minimum with these people that are investors to keep them informed, because they will start making stuff up if you don't give them the right stories. And what they make up is not going to be fun to deal with. Monthly letters on results. Woe be you if the first time they find out there's a problem in the business is when you have, quote, an annual meeting and have them all together and you dump a pile of bad news on them. So it's better to let them get a little bit irritated monthly or quarterly than it is to have the whole wrath of 20 people on you at one time in a room with you backed up against the wall. The last thing, and it may seem old, but don't play favorites. Lay down the rules at the beginning. Where this comes in, you start your business, you've got 4 relatives involved. One of them likes the garden club, one of them likes the arts museum, one of them likes one of the football teams in this state, and they want you to make a gift. Just give them $1,000. Give them, one starts, then another one. First thing you know, you're getting requests, and then when you start having to say no, then you become Mr. and Miss Evil family member because you don't have any civic pride. You don't want to do anything. So just be alert to that. And also this comes with hiring family members. From the start, tell them, okay, yeah, I can get them a pass in line, but they're going to have to meet the same rigorous standards all of our other employees do. It's not a favor just because it's you. Your name and your friendship may get them a place in line that moves a little ahead of some people, but it's not going to get them the job compared to someone that's more qualified. So with that, any questions out there? Yes. Why I think you might have one.
Yeah. So you said your division that you were in was the third largest. So when you had to speak with people above you, did you feel like your voice, like being as big as you were, that your voice was getting like, that you were ahead of anyone else, or was it being treated pretty equally, and it was sort of like you had to sort of wait in line to get your issues addressed?
No, being the third,
Yeah.
that we got
Yeah.
ahead of it.
Okay.
In the queue, we got up in the queue. We still had to perform, we still had to meet the requirement for the numbers and the results. But